to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin. Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, and welcome to this quiet hour where the world can soften around you and the mind can set down anything it has been carrying. Tonight you are invited to rest inside the warmth of a small Swiss tea house tucked high among snowy mountains where lanterns glow in the windows, herbs dry above the hearth, and the night moves slowly over the alpine valley. Let your body settle, let your shoulders loosen as though a gentle hand has brushed away the weight of the day. Let your jaw soften. Let your eyes rest behind closed lids or grow heavy as they watch the dimness of the room around you. Take a slow breath in, drawing in calm, and breathe out, letting the day drift away. There is no need to hurry here, no need to follow every word. The story will move at an easy pace like lamplight spreading over a wooden floor, like snow falling without sound beyond a window. Imagine now the cool purity of mountain air, the scent of pine and distant frost, the quiet hush of a village preparing for sleep. Somewhere high in the Swiss Alps, a narrow path winds between dark fir trees and moonlit slopes. At the end of that path waits a tea house, warm and golden, its roof folded under soft snow, its chimney sending a pale ribbon of smoke into the stars. And as your breathing becomes slower and your thoughts become lighter, the story begins to carry itself. Far above the valley, where the mountains held the last lavender color of evening, there stood a small tea house with green shutters and a red wooden door. It was built on a gentle rise just outside the village of Layla, where the houses gathered close together below, their roofs dusted with snow, their windows shining faintly in the winter dusk. The tea house faced the great peaks, which rose beyond the valley in quiet majesty, pale and blue beneath the moon. In summer, travelers came to sit on the terrace with cups of meadow tea and plates of honey cake. They watched cows wander through bright grass, listened to bells chiming on the slopes, and felt the sun warm their faces. But in winter, when the mountain paths grew hushed and white, only a few people found their way up to the tea house after sunset. Those who did were never sorry. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of dried herbs, beeswax, old wood, and something gently sweet from the oven. Bunches of mint, chamomile, linden blossom, alpine thyme, and silver-green sage hung from the beams in careful rows. Copper kettles gleamed along a shelf. Small porcelain cups waited behind glass cabinet doors, each painted with flowers, birds, or tiny mountain scenes. Along the far wall stood a deep tiled stove, sea green and shining, giving off a steady heat that wrapped the room in comfort. The keeper of the Teahouse was a woman named Mara. She had silver-threaded hair, calm eyes, and hands that moved with the unhurried grace of someone who knew every sound a house could make. She knew which stair creaked in winter, which window caught the earliest frost, and which kettle sang the clearest note when the water was ready. Each evening before the last light left the sky, she swept the stone step outside, lit the lantern above the door, and placed a small bell beside the counter. No sign hung outside except for a carved wooden cup, suspended from an iron hook. Snow gathered on its rim, and at night the lantern's glow turned the cup into a quiet little moon. On the evening this story begins, the valley lay beneath a deep, soft stillness. The sky was clear. The stars appeared early, bright and close, as though they had leaned down to listen. A half moon rested above the ridge, tracing silver along the edges of the pines. Far below, the village church bell had already rung for the closing of the day. Smoke rose from chimneys and thin blue columns, and lamps glowed behind curtains where families murmured over soup and bread before sleep. Mara stood at the Teahouse window and watched the snowfield beyond the path take on the color of pearl. She had just drawn a tray of small almond biscuits from the oven. They cooled now on the counter, pale and fragrant, their sugared tops glistening faintly. Beside them sat a dark loaf of rye bread, wrapped in linen, a crock of mountain butter, and a jar of honey gathered from summer blossoms, long since hidden under snow. She moved slowly from table to table, setting everything in order. The round table by the window received a small candle in a blue glass holder. The square table near the stove received a folded wool blanket, because old Herr Belwald from the village often came in after supper and liked to warm his knees while he drank nettle tea. On the narrow table beneath the herb bundles, Mara placed a little bowl of dried apple slices, because sometimes the children from the shepherd's road came by with their grandmother, and they were shy until offered something sweet. That night, however, she expected no one in particular. It pleased her, not knowing. A tea house in the mountains, she had often thought, was a kind of listening place. Some evenings were lively with laughter and boots stamping snow onto the floor. Some evenings were almost silent, with only the stove and kettle for company. And now and then there were nights when the house itself seemed to draw in a breath and wait for something tender, something small, and almost secret. Mara felt that kind of waiting in the room. She added 2 logs to the stove, closed the iron grate, and went to the counter. There, beneath the shelves of tea tins, she opened a drawer lined with blue cloth. Inside lay several small packets tied with thread. Each was labeled in her neat handwriting. Moon mint for clear dreams, linden and rose hip for a gentle heart, mountain balm for the weary, snowflower blend for travelers. She touched the last packet with the tips of her fingers. Snowflower was not truly a flower, not in the ordinary way. It was the name given in the village to the pale blossoms of a little alpine plant that bloomed during the brief summer near the highest springs. Its petals were white as fresh cream, and its scent was so faint that it could only be noticed in still air. Mara dried them carefully every year, mixing them with elderflower, lemon balm, and a few needles from the youngest tips of silver fir. It was a tea for arrivals after dark. She smiled to herself and closed the drawer. Just then, the bell above the door gave a soft, clear sound. A young woman stood on the threshold, wrapped in a dark wool cloak with snow along the shoulders. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, and her boots were dusted white. She held a small leather satchel close to her side. For a moment she simply stood there, blinking into the warm light as though she had stepped out of a dream and needed time to understand where she had landed. Mara crossed the room with a welcoming nod. "Come in from the cold," she said softly. The young woman stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a gentle thump. She removed her mittens, then lowered her hood. Her hair was brown and wind-touched, and a few melted flakes shone in it like tiny stars. "My name is Lena," she said. Her voice was quiet, careful, and tired. "I hope it is not too late." "It is just the right hour," said Mara. "Sit by the stove." Lena obeyed gratefully. She chose the table near the warmth and folded herself onto the wooden chair, as though the journey up the hill had been longer than she expected. Mara brought her a blanket without being asked, then set a candle on the table and lit it from the stove flame. The little flame wavered, grew steady, and filled the polished tabletop with honey-colored light. Outside, the night pressed softly against the windows. Mara prepared the snowflower blend. She took down a round clay teapot, warmed it with a little hot water, and emptied it again. Then she placed the herbs inside. They fell from her spoon in pale green and ivory curls. When the kettle was ready, she poured the steaming water slowly, and the scent rose at once, delicate and clean, like a summer meadow remembered through snowfall. Lena watched the steam with half-closed eyes. "You have walked far," Mara said. "From the lower station," Lena replied. "The last carriage was delayed, and I thought I might still reach the village before dark. But the road was quiet, and then the moon came up. I saw your lantern from below." The lantern sees many travelers before they see it. Lena smiled faintly at that, as though she found comfort in the thought. Mara brought the teapot, a white cup, and a small plate with almond biscuits. She poured the tea. It was pale gold, almost luminous in the candlelight. Lena wrapped her hands around the cup but did not drink immediately. She let the warmth pass into her fingers. She looked around the room with the slow gaze of someone returning to herself. Her eyes moved over the herb bundles, the painted cups, the copper kettles, the carved chairs, the green stove, and finally the window where the mountains stood in silver darkness. I used to come to these mountains when I was little, Lena said. Not here exactly. Another valley, perhaps. I remember cowbells and rain on a wooden roof. I remember a woman who made tea from flowers, but I do not remember her face. Mist and memory often share the same shawl, Mara said. Lena looked at her, then gave a soft laugh. Not because the words were amusing, but because they seemed to loosen something inside her. She sipped the tea. The warmth moved through her gradually. The flavor was gentle, not sharp or sweet, with the softness of blossoms and the brightness of fur. She drank again, and the room seemed to settle more deeply around her. For a while, neither woman spoke. The fire hummed faintly within the stove. A log shifted, releasing a quiet sigh. Somewhere in the beams, dried herbs stirred in a nearly invisible draft. The teahouse held its warmth with old patience. After some time, the bell above the door rang again. Mara turned. This time, 3 figures entered together. An elderly man in a fur-lined cap, a woman with round spectacles, and a boy perhaps old enough to carry his own small wooden sled, which he dragged carefully inside after knocking the snow from its runners. The elderly man was Herr Belwald, just as Mara had expected without expecting. The woman was his sister, Frau Amrine, who lived across the village square and embroidered table linens with blue flowers. The boy was her grandson, Nico, whose eyes went immediately to the almond biscuits. "Ah," said Herr Belwald, breathing in deeply. "The stove is awake." "It has been waiting for you," Mara replied. Frau Amrain unwrapped a knitted scarf from her neck. "The moon is bright enough to read by tonight." Nico insisted the path would be easy. "It was easy," said Nico. "The snow sparkles all the way up." "Then sparkling snow shall have a reward," said Mara. Soon they were seated at the square table. Herr Belwald received nettle tea with a spoonful of honey. Frau Amrine chose linden and rosehip. Nico was given warm milk with a drop of vanilla and a biscuit shaped like a crescent. Lena watched them quietly, feeling less like a stranger with each small domestic sound, the clink of spoons, the rustle of a scarf being folded. Nico whispering to his grandmother that the biscuit was too pretty to bite, then biting it anyway. Mara moved between the tables, not bustling, never hurrying. She seemed to know when to speak and when to leave space. The tea house filled with a gentle murmur, the kind that asks nothing from anyone and gives company without effort. Outside, the moon rose higher. The snowfields brightened. The pines stood in rows of dark lace. The path back to the village became a pale ribbon through the trees, and the window panes reflected the room faintly over the landscape, so that the candle flames seemed to float among the stars. Nico, after finishing his milk, carried his cup to the counter. On his way back, he paused near Lena's table. "Did you come from beyond the mountains?" he asked. "Not quite," Lena said. "From the city?" "Is the city louder than avalanches?" Frau Amrine made a soft sound of apology, but Lena smiled. Sometimes, she said, but avalanches know when to stop. Nico considered this with great seriousness. Then you should stay here tonight. In the village, yes, Lena said. I have a room at the inn, I think, though I have not yet found it. Herr Belwald leaned back in his chair. All roads find themselves by morning. Tonight, tea first. This seemed to settle the matter. Mara placed another small log in the stove. The old tiles glowed with stored warmth. Then she took a brass key from her apron pocket and unlocked a cabinet above the counter. From it, she removed a wooden music box, no larger than a loaf of bread. It was carved with edelweiss and tiny deer, and its lid was polished smooth from many years of handling. Nico's eyes widened. Will it play? If everyone listens softly, Mara said. She wound the key and opened the lid. A melody began, delicate and clear, with notes like small drops of water falling into a mountain spring. It was not a lively tune. It wandered gently as though moving through snow under moonlight, pausing here and there beside a tree, a stone, a sleeping field. The whole tea house grew quieter. Lena lowered her gaze to the steam rising from her cup. The melody carried her somewhere she could almost remember. A summer hill, a path through tall grass, a wooden balcony with red geraniums, rain tapping on a roof, a warm cup placed into her hands by someone whose face remained blurred, but whose kindness had stayed all these years beneath the surface of her life. She had come to the mountains because she was tired in a way sleep alone had not mended. The city had been crowded with errands, voices, letters, bells, and obligations. Days had folded into one another. Even when she rested, her thoughts kept moving. She had booked the journey almost without knowing why, following a quiet inner thread that tugged her upward towards snow and height and air thin enough to make the mind gentle. Now in the tea house, she began to feel that thread unwind. The music box played until its last note trembled and vanished. No one spoke at once. Even Nico seemed content to sit with the silence afterward. Then Frau Amrein said, "My mother knew that song." "So did mine," said Herr Belwald. Mara closed the lid of the music box with care. It has belonged to the tea house longer than I have. How long has the tea house been here? Lena asked. Mara looked toward the window. Long enough to have learned the weather? Herr Belwald chuckled. Long enough to know all our secrets. Only the ones people leave willingly, said Mara. Snow began to fall again. At first it was hardly visible. A few flakes crossed the window like pale moths. Then more came, drifting slowly through the moonlight. The mountains, already quiet, became quieter still. The village lights below blurred into warm points. The path softened at the edges. Mara lit another lantern and hung it near the door. The room took on a deeper glow, amber and green, with shadows resting in the corners like folded blankets. Frau Amrein drew a small piece of embroidery from her bag and began to work by the candlelight. Her needle moved in and out of the linen, making tiny blue petals. Herr Belwald closed his eyes, not sleeping, only listening. Nico lay his cheek on his folded arms and watched the stove. Lena drank the last of her tea. A sense of peace spread through her slowly and thoroughly, like warmth entering cold hands. She no longer felt the need to explain herself, even to herself. She was simply there in a small Swiss tea house on a snowy night, with strangers who were not strange for long, surrounded by herbs, lamplight, and the soft breathing of the mountains. After a while, Mara approached her table with the teapot. "More?" she asked. "Yes, please." The second cup was even softer than the first. Lena noticed the tiny things now, the way steam curled and disappeared, the faint pattern of carved leaves along the chair back, the small crack in the blue glass candle holder through which light escaped in a thin, bright line, the hush that followed each flake of snow, though no ear could truly hear it land. The doorbell rang a third time. A gust of cold entered, carrying the scent of snow and pine. Behind it came a man with a lantern in his hand and a wool cloak clasped at the throat. His beard was dark with frost. He stamped his boots gently, then removed his cap. "Good evening," he said. "I saw the light." "The light saw you first," Nico murmured sleepily, repeating what he had heard earlier. The man smiled. "Then I am grateful to it." His name was Thomas, a wood carver from a village beyond the ridge. He had been delivering a repaired cradle to a farmhouse and had taken the upper path home, trusting the moon. But when the snow thickened, the teahouse lantern drew him in. Mara gave him spiced apple tea, rye bread with butter, and a seat near the window. He thanked her with the relief of someone who had not known how cold he was until warmth found him. Soon the tea house held 6 guests and its keeper, all gathered by chance under the same roof while snow deepened outside. There was no sense of being trapped, for the storm was gentle. The village was close, the night kind, and the tea house strong. It was the sort of snow that asked people to stay a little longer than planned, to pour another cup, to remember that not every delay is an interruption. Some delays are invitations. Thomas removed a small piece of wood from his coat pocket and began to smooth it with a folding knife, catching the shavings in his palm. He explained that it was pear wood, meant to become a bird for the top of a child's cradle. Nico woke fully at the sight. "Can you make a fox?" "I can try," said Thomas. "A sleeping fox?" "That is the best kind to carve." The adult smiled. Thomas took a second scrap from his pocket and began with slow, careful cuts. The knife moved softly. Curl after curl of pale wood fell into his hand. Under his fingers, a small shape emerged. First only a suggestion, then a curled back, a pointed nose, a tail tucked neatly around the body. Lena watched the fox appear. There was something soothing about it, the patient revealing of what had seemed hidden inside the wood all along. Thomas did not force the shape. He listened to the grain. He turned the piece now and then, as though asking it where it wished to go. Mara brought him a candle so he could see better. The snow tapped faintly against the window, though it was too soft to make a sound. Frau Amrine embroidered blue flowers. Herr Belwald began telling a quiet story about a winter many years ago, when the snow had risen to the lower shutters and the village children had tunneled between houses like marmots. Nico laughed, then yawned. Lena smiled into her cup. The story drifted rather than marched. Herr Belwald forgot certain parts, and Frau Amrine corrected him gently. Thomas added that in his village they had once built a snow chapel after such a storm, complete with a little bell made of ice. Mara said that ice bells ring only for people who listen with their eyes, and Nico tried to look as though he understood. The hours moved slowly. Beyond the windows, the night grew rich and deep. The moon slipped behind a veil of cloud, and the falling snow became the brightest thing outside. The teahouse seemed to float in whiteness, lifted away from ordinary roads and ordinary time. Inside, the stove glowed. Cups emptied and were filled again. The scent of herbs mingled with wood smoke and vanilla and apples. Lena felt herself becoming quieter with every breath. Her thoughts no longer rushed ahead. They rested on the present moment, then dissolved. She thought of the city, but it seemed far away, not in a troubling way, simply distant, like a sound heard from another valley. She thought of the work waiting for her return, and it no longer pressed against her chest. She thought of the person she had been trying so hard to become, and for the first time in many months she felt kind toward that person. Mara noticed, as she noticed most things, that Lena's shoulders had dropped and that her hands lay open beside her cup. "You came to the right mountain," Mara said softly as she passed. Lena looked up. "How would you know?" "The wrong mountain does not make the breathing easier." Lena closed her eyes briefly and found that this was true. Near the stove, Nico had fallen asleep, sitting upright, his head leaning against his grandmother's arm. Frau Amrine placed her embroidery aside and wrapped his scarf loosely around him. Herr Belwald, who had insisted he was not tired, had grown very still, his hands folded over the top of his walking stick. Thomas finished the little fox and set it on the table. It was no longer than a finger curled into itself, with its tiny nose tucked beneath its tail. Nico, though asleep, opened his hand when his grandmother placed it there, and the fox settled into his palm as though it had always belonged. The sight made everyone quiet. Mara went to the shelves and selected a final tea for the room. She did not ask who wanted it. She brewed a large pot from chamomile, linden, and a pinch of lavender. The fragrance was soft and floral, warm as clean linen dried in sunlight. She poured a little for each person. Even those who had thought themselves finished accepted it. The tea marked a change in the evening. Conversation fell away into murmurs, then into comfortable silence. The snow outside began to ease. The storm had never been fierce, and now it thinned like a dream nearing dawn, though dawn was still far off. The moon returned, muted behind clouds, spreading a calm silver glow over the path. Mara opened the door for a moment and stepped onto the stone threshold. cold air entered softly, not sharply. The world outside was transformed. The trees wore white along every branch. The path down to the village was smooth, but visible beneath the lantern light. The roofs below rested under snow like sleeping animals. Above everything, the mountains stood, immense and peaceful, holding the night as a bowl holds water. Mara listened. There was no wind, no distant crack of ice, no call of owl or fox, only the deep alpine quiet, a silence so complete it seemed to have texture, soft and thick and kind. She stepped back inside. "The path is clear enough," she said, "but there is no need to hurry." No one did. At last Herr Belveld stirred and declared that old bones must return before they became part of the furniture. Frau Amrain laughed softly and woke Nico with a hand on his shoulder. The boy blinked, looked at the fox in his palm, and smiled without fully understanding where it had come from. Thomas fastened his cloak and tucked his carving knife away. Lena rose too, though slowly, as if leaving the chair meant leaving a small sheltered world. Mara wrapped almond biscuits in paper for the walk down. She gave Nico an extra one for morning, though everyone knew it would not last that long. She handed Thomas a little packet of tea for the road beyond the ridge. To Herr Belwald she gave nothing because he came often and would pretend to protest, and because friendship sometimes needs no parcel. For Lena, Mara prepared a small envelope of snowflower blend. "Steep it when you wish to remember this night," she said. Lena held the envelope carefully. "Will it taste the same elsewhere?" "No," said Mara, "but neither will you. That is part of the charm." They put on their coats, scarves, hats, and mittens. The teahouse door opened, and the night received them gently. Together they walked down the path toward the village, their steps making soft impressions in the fresh snow. Mara stood in the doorway with the lantern behind her. She watched them go. Herr Belwald steady with his stick, Frau Amrain guiding sleepy Nico, Thomas carrying his lantern, and Lena walking last, pausing once to look back. From below, the tea house looked like a warm star resting on the hillside. Lena lifted her hand. Mara lifted hers in return. Then the travelers continued, and the pines slowly folded them into shadow and silver. The descent was quiet. No one spoke much. There was no need. The snow brightened the path, and the village lights drew nearer step by step. Nico was half carried by his grandmother, still holding the little fox. Herr Belwald hummed a fragment of the music box melody under his breath. Thomas turned at the fork toward the inn, making sure Lena knew the way. The inn stood near the village fountain, with painted shutters and a wooden sign that creaked softly in the night. A lamp burned above the entrance. Lena thanked the others and wished them peaceful sleep. Frau Amrain patted her hand. Herr Belwald nodded as though they had known each other for years. Thomas gave a small bow and continued toward the road that would lead him by morning over the ridge. Inside the inn, all was quiet. The innkeeper, having expected Lena earlier, greeted her kindly but without fuss. Soon she was shown to a small room beneath the eaves. The ceiling sloped low over the bed. A braided rug lay beside it. On the windowsill sat a little vase with dried alpine flowers, pale and fragile in the moonlight. Lena removed her boots. She hung her cloak on a peg. She placed the snowflower envelope on the bedside table beside a candle and a bowl of matches. Then she opened the window just a little. Cold mountain air entered, clean and faintly scented with snow. From somewhere beyond the roofs came the muffled sound of the stream under ice. The village slept. The teahouse lantern was no longer visible from her window, hidden by trees and the curve of the hill. But Lena could feel it there, a quiet warmth in the mind. She climbed into bed. The quilt was heavy and soft. The pillow smelled faintly of sun-dried linen and cedar. Her body, which had been carrying more than she had admitted, sank gratefully into stillness. For a while she watched the moonlight on the wall. She thought of Mara's hands pouring tea, of herbs hanging from beams, of a carved fox sleeping in a child's palm, of strangers gathered by snow into a circle of warmth, of the way the mountains did not ask her to be anything other than present. Her breathing slowed. The room grew softer at the edges, and as sleep came near, Lena imagined the tea house after everyone had gone. Mara would be moving through the room again, clearing cups, folding blankets, banking the fire. She would wipe the tables with a warm cloth, brush crumbs from the counter, and set the music box back inside its cabinet. She would pause by the window and look out at the shining snow. The stove would glow lower, the herbs would hang in fragrant stillness. The lantern above the door would burn a little longer, just in case another traveler needed to find the way. Then at last, Mara would turn the key, climb the narrow stairs to her room above the tea house, and leave the little house to dream among the mountains. And dream it would. It would dream of summer bees in clover, of winter boots by the door, of copper kettles singing, of snowflowers blooming near hidden springs, of all the people who had come cold or weary or uncertain and left with something warm held quietly inside them. The night deepened. The village rested. The mountains kept watch without effort. And Lena slept. She slept with the ease of someone who had been gently found by the world again. She slept while snow loosened from pine branches and fell in soft sighs to the ground. She slept while the moon crossed the sky and the stars leaned over the valley. She slept while the tea house lantern glowed faintly on the hill, then dimmed, then disappeared into the tender dark before dawn. Now the story grows quieter, too. The path is covered in soft snow. The teacups are washed and resting. The stove is warm beneath its ashes. The little carved fox sleeps in a child's hand. The herbs hang still above the beams. There is nothing to solve, nothing to carry, nothing more that needs to be done tonight. Only the hush of the mountains, only the warmth of the Teahouse remembered, only the slow, gentle rhythm of breathing in and breathing out. Let the room around you become peaceful. Let every thought drift farther away, like snow falling beyond a window. The night is kind. The path is safe. The lantern has led you home. Rest now, dear traveler. Sleep well. Good night.